On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas wins the battle of the last two national champions, top five showdown. They come away with the 69-65 victory. Vegas always knows. We're recapping the game on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts. Find us on our YouTube page. Thank you to the everydayers tuning in to each and every show. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're recapping Kansas UConn. Jayhawks victorious 69-65 in a top five showdown. We'll go through the game, the overview, go to the game, what's next for KU, and a little bit on an ode to a great season for the KU volleyball team. To finish up, we are brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Kansas 69, Connecticut 65. Jayhawks entered in number 5. Connecticut entered in number 4 by Ken Palm. Kansas entered in at number 7, and Connecticut entered in at number 3. Oddly enough, the Jayhawks have actually dropped with some other teams around them, but it's, whatever. The offense has gone up. The defense is basically the same. They're still one of the best teams in the country. And that's what this win indicated. I think UConn is one of the best teams in the country. And so you winning the game is indicative that you too are one of the best teams in the country. And it's not like we didn't know that. They're preseason number 1. But I kind of thought if you lost this game, maybe there was going to be thoughts of, okay, Kansas is still a top 10 team if you lose this game, but maybe they're on the second tier of the title contenders. You win this game, it feels still in that top tier of title contenders. And maybe that's overreacting to a random game in December, but I don't know, maybe that's how it would have felt, especially on the cusp of the Eastern Illinois game, which we said at the time, if you win this game, that erases that. Doesn't it feel like the Eastern Illinois game was erased? Who cares what happened in that one, right? So an excellent start for Kansas. They got off hot. They were shooting threes. UConn was shooting a bunch of threes. They were just on higher volume. You were doing it more efficiently on lower volume, and you got up 38-26 with like 2 minutes to go in the first half, and it was like, man, Kansas is dominating this game. I think Dan Hurley said in the post game, the crowd got into it and, kind of got them on their heels. Bill Self said afterwards, that was one of the best environments it has ever been in Allen Fieldhouse. So, shout out to the fans who were in attendance and the students for making that a thing. Obviously, Allen Fieldhouse is always great. And the crowd in attendance and the people making noise are always great. The environment's always great. But it was another level in that game. And at times that sometimes we see, like when they're playing Missouri or, some of these other big conference non-conference matchups. So an excellent start. They finished the half strong to tighten it up, and then you kind of waned a little bit. There was a moment there where I think you had like 12 points over 14 minutes of game time between the end of the first half and the start of the second half, and they took advantage, right? I mean, Tristan Newton was unbelievable in this game. It would have still had you in front by the lead if you would have been executing more offensively, but you weren't making shots. They were getting offensive rebounds. And then you hit that big run at the end. Did Ted Lasso, did Jason Sudeikis give some sort of words of encouragement at the under 8 timeout or something? Kevin McCullar came back to Kansas, and boy, did he come up clutch. You can do this all the time with every sports team. And also there's, we never look at it as, well, if you didn't get this player, what else would you have done? Where would have been the ripple effect? What would you have done in the transfer portal or picking up other? But what would Kansas have done if Kevin McCullar didn't come back for another year at school? You know what I mean? Like, where would they be right now? And he has been unbelievable so far this season. He puts up 21 points in this game, and he hits those big threes. And, I mean, he was also taking on the challenge at different times through the game, having to guard Tristan Newton. Now, KU was switching a lot, as they normally do, so it wasn't always on him. But that tires you out on both ends. And, he was so impactful in this game and hit some of the biggest shots of the game. And honestly, like, I'd imagine there were a good amount of NBA scouts either there or watching the game, because you have a lot of, NBA players on Connecticut and players possibly on Kansas. And I've seen Kevin McCullar even, be a late first round pick in some updated mock drafts. That game probably got a lot of attention. For him to go 3 of 4 from 3 and hit some of the big shots he did, especially the one over Johnson coming at him in the corner, and he's able to get the high arcer in for the 3. That is so big for him personally in his potential NBA draft stuff. So I feel great for him. So cool for KJ Adams, man. We're going to get to our goats of the game. We'll talk more about KJ and Kevin McCullar, but the story that KJ just had to go through with his mom passing away, and I think he's going to the funeral tomorrow in Austin. Like, so cool for him to do what he did in closing out the game with the free throws and just to have an excellent all-around game in general. And I thought it was very interesting because you look at the Connecticut team last year that won the national title. Andre Jackson was one of their key pieces, and they went through a transition period with Jackson where at the beginning it was great. Then in conference play, teams started basically he wasn't like a big shooter, but he had a good feel for the game. He was a good defender. He was a good passer. He was a good rebounder. He was a good cutter. He could hit a little push shot in the lane. And they took advantage of that eventually, but it took some time to figure out when other teams started guarding him that way. I think there are some similarities between, KJ Adams and Andre Jackson, a lot of different, Andre Jackson, more of a ball handler, point guard type. But I thought that was kind of interesting that he had that big game against Connecticut, who had him kind of a similar role. And Dan Hurley, very complimentary, I guess would be the right word, of KJ Adams in the postgame. Now, there's a real chance, because now Kansas has wins over Tennessee, Connecticut, and UConn. There's a real chance one of those three teams end up being like a 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, and the other two, maybe 2, 3, 4 seeds, right? So, these are big wins that could move you up in line. These are big wins that could keep you in front of somebody in a tiebreaker scenario. These are big wins that tack onto your quad 1 wins and everything like that. So big deal for Kansas to win this game, even though it is in December. And what's funny is, honestly, outside of the 3-point shooting, because KU went bonkers from 3, 9 of 14 from 3, not high volume, but insane efficiency. Kansas did a lot of things well and not well that they normally do. Now, it wasn't everything, but normally Kansas goes into the game and they have the advantage on 2-point shooting. In this game, it was less pronounced. It was like 44% to like 42% or something like that. But you still had it against a team in UConn who came in, and typically that's been their calling card. They've been the dominant 2-point shooting team. So you still had a slight advantage there. We're used to seeing that with Kansas. You still were a team who's good at passing. Like, it wasn't one of KU's insane assist total numbers. I think it was 13 for the game, but they're still moving the ball well and getting, good looks, whether they made them or not. And they did some things poorly that we're used to seeing them do poorly so far early in the season, right? You missed some key free throws, even though you came up clutch at the end. You didn't force turnovers in this game. I think UConn had 8 turnovers or something like that. So there were certain things that were very indicative of what you've just kind of been all season. But it feels a lot better when those sorts of things happen and you win the game. And it feels even better when your win is against a top 5 opponent. I'll say this too. Even though you held that slight edge on 2-point shooting, they did stifle you more than anyone else. I mean, maybe Marquette, but that was kind of a different thing. UConn is a really good shot blocking team and 2-point defense team. They stifled you more than anyone else. And most teams can. Not a lot of other teams have a Donovan Clingan, a 7'3" center who could be a lottery pick in the NBA draft. And I think that's impressive too. You showed that against an elite opponent who can take away your main offensive strength. I don't know, maybe you'd say the passing is the main offensive strength. Maybe you'd say it's 2-point offense. One of your main offensive strengths. They mitigated it. They made it less of a strength and more of just a thing that you edged them out in. You still found a way to win. And that's the good sign. And that's the crux of this all. And I think this win for Kansas. Kansas has some flaws, like every team in the country does. You showed in this game that you can beat elite opponents, even with some of your flaws and having something taken away. One of your strengths was kind of taken away. Some of your flaws still showed up in this game. This was not Kansas just playing a perfect game and edging out a win. Again, they didn't force turnovers and you had some rebounding stuff. And some of that stuff will happen. You still beat an elite opponent. Now, did 9 of 14 from 3? Did no Stephon Castle for UConn? Did some of that stuff help mask some of that? Yeah, you bet it did. Did it help to be in front of that Rocky Allen Fieldhouse crowd instead of on a neutral court at UConn? Yeah, of course it did. But also UConn got a bananas game from Tristan Newton. KU's still figuring stuff out. You basically played a 6-man rotation in this one. Ideally, you'd like to think, okay, maybe our 7th guy, maybe our 8th guy, maybe even our 5th and 6th guy who are part of that 6-man rotation are going to be much better players come a month from now, come 2 months from now. You take the win and you feel validated. You are 7-1 with wins over Connecticut, Kentucky, Tennessee, and your only loss is to a top 3 or top 5 Marquette team. Things are pretty good in Lawrence. And oh, by the way, Jason Sudeikis and Sue Bird were there. So, pop culture capital in addition to the basketball excellence from what we saw against UConn. All right, we're going to take a quick break in the action, get to our goats of the game, good goats, bad goats coming up here with Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can get in on the Texas-Oklahoma State Big 12 championship game. You can get on any of the other championship games. You can get on NFL on Sunday with the Chiefs-Packers game coming on Sunday Night Football. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. There's a bunch of boosts on there too. And kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Our goats of the game. We'll get to our good goats, then our bad goats. So again, if you're new to this segment, good goats, greatest of all time. That's kind of the new age way to say it. When I was growing up, goat was a bad thing. You were kind of the scapegoat of something bad that happened. So the good goats here, we're going to start with KJ Adams. 18 points. That was second on Kansas in a game where DeJuan Harris struggled shooting the ball. He hit the early three, but he finished, I think, 1 of 7. To be clear, I don't have DeJuan in either of these. I thought DeJuan was fine. The shooting wasn't great, but he was still, calm, reliable as a passer, and, did some stuff good defensively. Tristan Newton made some of it go for naught when he was on him. Sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't, but that's a story for later in this episode. KJ Adams, 18 points on 6 of 10 from the floor. We saw him hitting that push shot. He's gotten actually pretty good at that little 10 to 12 to 14 footer, either at the elbow or just inside the free throw line, whether it's a push shot or I'm actually taking the jump shot. It's looked pretty good. He also had 5 rebounds, which I know that's not like a super high number that sticks out, but that's one of the higher numbers he's had so far this season. So, there too. He's a good passer, 2 assists in the game. And how about this? He started 2 of 13 on free throws this season. We had Brian Haney, voice of the Jayhawks, on during Rock Chalk Sports Talk earlier this week. And he pointed out, and he mentioned it on the broadcast earlier this week against Eastern Illinois. If you remember last year, KJ struggled to start the year from free throw shooting, and then he finished the year really well. I don't remember what the number finished at. It was around 60% on the season. But if you just go from after the 2 of 13 start, he was closer to 65, 70%. You look at conference only numbers, KJ was shooting well from the free throw line. So this year he struggled to start. And this is what Brian pointed out. Also 2 for 13 from the free throw line, the exact number he was last year before he turned it around. I think he went 2 for 3 against Eastern Illinois. So that'll work. If you're KJ and you're shooting 65% from the free throw line, you take that. He went 6 of 9 today. And he hits the final 2 that seal the deal. When you were up 2, you needed him to at least hit 1 to make you feel like, okay, we can either foul or just hope, we have insurance if they make a 3. And then he hits both to seal the game. And awesome. I know his mom's looking down on him. He's going out to his her funeral tomorrow in Austin, and just really cool stuff. Really, really happy for him because he's just, I don't know. He's just such a good kid. He tries so hard, and really like to see that happen to somebody like KJ. Kevin McCullar, 21 points. Went 6 of 10 from the floor, 3 of 4 from 3. As we talked about, that's big for his showcase. Also had 5 rebounds, and he was having to exert a lot of energy on the defensive end, whether he was guarding, Spencer kind of coming around ball screens or switching on Tristan Newton. He was having to exert a lot of energy on both ends of the floor and came up with seemingly the biggest shots of the game for you during that big run in the second half. He was excellent, and he has been a steady, consistent force all season long. Taking that Jalen Wilson, Ochag Baji type jump right now is what Kevin McCullar is doing. Hunter Dickinson. It's funny because I don't even know. I'm going to look this up, but Hunter Dickinson, from a statistic output, from just okay, this is how many points he had, this is how many rebounds he had. This has got to be on the low end for him, right? He had 15 points and 9 rebounds against Connecticut, 6 of 12 from the floor, so 50%. So the 15 points are his second lowest of the season. The only one lower was Marquette. The 9 rebounds, he had 8 rebounds in 3 games, so it's 1 away from being tied for his lowest of the year. So in theory, the statistical output is 15 and 9 is still really good. But for Hunter Dickinson, it's both those are below his averages. Well, he had 4 blocks in this game. He played 38 minutes. And part of this is the 4 blocks. He holds Donovan Clingan, who is the possible lottery pick, big man for UConn, who's a National Player of the Year candidate too. He helped hold Clingan to 8 points on 3 of 8 shooting. Now, Clingan was in a bit of foul trouble throughout the game. Dickinson had 4 fouls too, so he had to deal with a little bit of that. But Dickinson was excellent at helping prevent that. And UConn didn't have a big 2-point shooting game. Like, UConn came in one of the top 3 teams in the country in 2-point offense. Okay, they shot 42% from twos in this game. Now, part of that is the other guards or KJ or some of the other, but a lot of it is Hunter Dickinson being at the rim and being a presence. So credit to him, because I thought he was really good in this game, even though the statistic output was far from, the Kentucky game or the Tennessee game necessarily. Contributions from Elmarko Jackson and Johnny Furphy. I couldn't quite get there putting either one like on the list. Like, Marco had like 6 points, and Johnny Furphy had a couple of big threes for you, but neither one's stats like jumped off the page. Bill Self, though, said after the game that both played well, so we'll just take it from him, I guess. He knows more. He'll forget more about basketball than I'll know, that's for sure. But they made some key plays when they needed to. Like, the second 3 that Furphy hit was a very important shot, and moments before he had missed kind of a good look from 3, but he was able to get one back and knock it in. Elmarko, that like you saw a little bit of the mid-range. I thought that was really good to see him hit that like mid-range jump shot, because that was kind of an indication. I think he hit 2 mid-range jump shots. That he had a little confidence going for his shot, which you like to see there. But I thought he played hard to. I mean, there was a lot of time that he was guarding Tristan Newton, which we're going to get into the Tristan Newton stuff here. Like, yes, he went off. I don't think that was as much about Kansas messing up. Yes, there were a few times they left him too open. I think that was more about Tristan Newton just having a really good game and just going off and being a good player. Like, I don't think it was as much about like, oh, you messed this up. There was like 1-3 where I remember him being wide open, some of the foul stuff, but like, I don't know, it's kind of a good effort there. And I loved the turnaround. Yeah, like, as freshmen, you're going to make a mistake early in the season. And that was a bad mistake. It was the throw to KJ Adams when you're trying to preserve the lead. But to see the freshman not get in his own head and come back, and I forget who was driving for UConn, it might have been Diarra, and he kind of strips it from behind and it hits off his leg and goes out of bounds. That play was so critical for KU, and credit to Marco for that. The last good goat we have here is Jamari McDowell's celebration. Now, McDowell didn't get really in the game much, which a bit of a surprise, that's for sure. Certainly it seems like Furphy is just going to be the first guy off the bench. I mean, the way this is going, like, this was a perfect game to show who Bill Self trusts, right? Marco Jackson and Johnny Furphy are kind of guys right now. But that was an awesome celebration by Jamari McDowell. And I still think Jamari is gonna have some moments this season and gonna have a bright future at KU. So I think this, the next game, like UMKC, you're going to go deeper on the bench, and moving forward, that'll probably be a case for the next month, barring some close moments late in games. Maybe if you're with that with like Missouri, Yale, or Indiana or something like that. But yeah, that was a fun celebration with him doing the, the chutzpah. You have lots of intestinal fortitude, I guess would be the way to put it. Our bad goats here, bench depth. Now, was this just more about Bill Self and what he wanted to do and goat the guys he trusted? I think you did see tonight what it would probably look like in an NCAA tournament game. I think ideally in a tournament game, you're maybe 7 deep, so maybe somebody else gets more. But normally, part of your rotation is having a backup center, because normally your center might, like, Doak was going 25 minutes a game. Dave was going 25 minutes a game. With Hunter, he can go, we saw tonight, like 38 minutes a game. So maybe come March, this is what it looks like in the rotation. But Parker Brown, Jamari McDowell, Nick Timberlake, they combined for 4 minutes played in this game. So you didn't have a lot of bench depth in this one. The final 2 minutes of both halves of play were a little bit of adventures. So Marco Jackson hits the mid-range jump shot with like 2:17 or 2-something and change in the first half. At that point, you're up 38-26. They finished on a 5-0 run to finish the half. So that wasn't ideal to get them kind of back into it. Then with 2.5 left in the second half, you were up 63-57. And then Caravan hits a layup, and then things get a little, I guess they only outscored you by 2 over the final 2.5, but like, things got closer than that for certain moments, and you almost let things get out of hand with, some turnovers or missed free throws or, not making stops here or there. So things got a little crazy there in the final couple minutes of both halves, but you found out or you dug deep and figured out a way to win at the very end. The other bad goat here, you still need to force more turnovers and get more on the off or just on the glass in general. They out offensive rebounded you 10-5. Like you'd like to see that get closer to even. Now they're a really good rebounding team, so it's tough to do. But KU has the personnel to be a good rebounding team. And again, you only forced like 8 turnovers in this game. That's a number that I think KU has the personnel to be better at. And then the last one here, I don't even want to say defending Tristan Newton, so I'm not going to, because again, I thought he was just hitting tough shots and playing kind of above his shooting. I mean, he came in 32% for his career in like 4 or 5 years of college, 29% this year. So you don't bank on that happening from 3. The one thing that I think you would like to not do is maybe foul 3 3-point shooters in the same game. That's kind of a recipe for causing some issues for you. All right, that's our go to the game. Let's finish up with what's next and a little KU volleyball here with Locked On Jayhawks. Finishing up with what's next for KU and a little KU volleyball. So what's next for the basketball team? They're going to take on UMKC on Tuesday. That'll be a 7:00 game. Then they'll get Missouri on Saturday. So, that one's different because Missouri's not as good of a team, obviously, as Kentucky. But the emotional level from the crowd, from, you would hope the players, certainly is going to get up there. I think it helps that you have DeJuan Harris. I've talked about this before. He's from Columbia. It probably helps set the tone. Obviously, a lot of these core members are a couple of starters with KJ and Kevin were in that environment last year, which I think would help going to Columbia and getting to experience that. So having that in the rivalry, that'll be fun. And then you're at Indiana the following Saturday. But you should from here be able to go, like they're favored to go 5-0 the rest of the way in the non-con. At the very worst, like maybe you get sniped at Indiana or something like that on a weird Saturday morning. Maybe one game you get sniped in some way. At worst, you should go 4-1 in these next 5. But 5-0 is what you're going to be picked to do from Vegas and KenPom and all those different sites. Now, I did want to do a quick ode to the KU volleyball team here. They lost in the second round to Penn State. It was a tough draw for them. A lot of people thought Penn State should have been one of the top 4 seeds and hosting on their own, and would have been tough for KU. It is unfortunate they lose in the second round. Doesn't take away unbelievably great season for them. They won, I think, 23, 24 games. They finished second in the Big 12. They had some unbelievable wins over the course of the regular season, whether it was sweeping Kansas State, whether it was winning at BYU, the only team to win at BYU in the regular season. Just a lot of fun memories and moments at Houston, UCF games, all that sort of stuff for the team. And it's a very talented team. They won a ton of awards. They're going to be back for more next year. They fought tooth and nail to the bitter end. They were up 11-9 in the 5th, just could not quite close it out against Penn State. But future very bright. I feel very bad for Reagan Cooper, who was unreal to finish out this match and this season for KU. She's a grad transfer. Did win her first NCAA tournament game by them winning in the first round, so that's cool. She got to stay. She did that. But it just sucks for her that she graduates because she was so epic at the end of this year. I think they lose 3 players to graduation. She's obviously, one of them. They'll lose one of the middle blockers and then they'll lose one of their DSs. I guess you never know nowadays with the trades from Portland, how all that stuff works. But everybody else can come back. Like Cameron Turner can come back, who was the Big 12 setter of the year. Caroline Bien can come back for senior season. I don't know how all this works with the COVID year, if they have 2 more years or 1 or whatever. But then they have the number 1 recruiting class coming in the Big 12, top 5 in the country. So KU volleyball going to still be really good next year. And I think next year they can maybe take another step up if they can, get some progression from players. The freshmen come in hitting hard, and maybe you add another transfer portal player too, because it worked pretty well with some of the additions you had this past year. But shout out to them, because another unbelievable season for Ray Bechard in the group. Just unfortunate ending, but it always is whenever you don't win the title. It's never going to feel fun, right? All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. You can like and subscribe to us on our YouTube page. We'll be back later this weekend to talk about whatever bowl game the KU gets selected to. Then we'll get to a KU UMKC preview earlier next week. This has been Locked On Jayhawks.